Welcome. Let's get you briefed on today's important global stories. We've synthesized information from various sources to bring you up to speed.
Okay, first up, the humanitarian situation in Gaza. It's reached a critical point. A UN-backed assessment is warning of a significant risk of famine.
Famine risk for the entire 2.1 million population.
That's the assessment. The IPC report highlights extreme levels of food insecurity affecting everyone. Nearly 500,000 are facing what they call catastrophic hunger.
And this is a worsening situation since last October, right?
A major deterioration, yes. It's largely linked to an Israeli blockade ongoing for about 70 days now, since mid-March. It's stopping food, medicine, other essentials from getting in.
And aid agencies are raising alarms.
They are. Serious concerns about potential war crimes, even a deliberate policy of starvation. You've got 1 in 5 Gazans facing starvation now.
That's staggering. And the impact on children.
It's devastating. Projections estimate nearly 71,000 children under 5 will become acutely malnourished in the coming year. People are resorting to begging, even scavenging garbage for food.
Just desperate measures. Amidst this, there was a hostage release.
Yes, Hamas released Israeli-American hostage Eden Alexander. They stated it was partly to facilitate aid entry and push for a ceasefire.
But Israel's response wasn't leaning towards a ceasefire.
No. Prime Minister Netanyahu thanked President Trump for his support in the release, but he immediately reaffirmed plans to intensify military actions. Ruled out a ceasefire.
And Trump's visiting the region soon?
He is, due Tuesday. Israel's indicated it will expand its offensive if no deal is reached by the end of that visit.
Expanding the offensive. What does that entail?
The plans reportedly include seizing all of Gaza, displacing Palestinians further south, and bringing in private companies for aid distribution.
Which the UN opposes.
Strongly opposes. Qatar and Egypt, though, see the hostage release as maybe, just maybe, an opening for new truce talks.
Yeah.
But that IPC report calls Israel's aid plans highly insufficient.
A very complex and grim picture. Just to recap, this conflict started after the Hamas attacks on October 7th, 2023.
Correct. And the death toll in Gaza, according to the Hamas-run health ministry, has now exceeded 52,000.
Okay, let's shift focus to the U.S., where a group of white South Africans have arrived.
Yes, 59 individuals. They're set to be granted refugee status.
And the Trump administration expedited this.
Reportedly, yes, citing alleged racial discrimination against the Afrikaner minority in South Africa.
But the South African government doesn't agree.
No, they deny any persecution that would warrant refugee status. And it's notable because the Trump administration has halted pretty much all other refugee admissions.
So Human Rights Watch called it a cruel racial twist.
They did, pointing out that many Black and Afghan refugees have been denied entry. Also unusual, the UNHCR wasn't involved in the vetting process this time.
And President Trump has made claims about a genocide of white farmers.
He has. Claims which South African President Ramaphosa directly told him are not true. Ramaphosa emphasized the standard definition of a refugee persecution based on politics, religion, or economics.
Though a U.S. State Department official said it's not surprising a country wouldn't admit its citizens qualify for refugee status.
Right. There's also context with the U.S. criticizing South Africa's land policy, which allows seizure without compensation in some cases, though the government says it hasn't actually happened yet under that act.
And Elon Musk has weighed in, too.
Also making claims about a genocide of white people and racist ownership laws, claims widely discredited.
There's been quite a reaction in the U.S. Gregory Meeks called it a racist dog whistle.
And the Episcopal Church has pulled back from working with the government on resettlement due to this perceived preferential treatment. Vice President J.D. Vance tweeted it was crazy.
Refugee advocates are pointing out the hypocrisy.
Yes, a lawyer with the International Refugee Assistance Project highlighted the unequal treatment, especially with the main U.S. refugee admissions program suspended. Even some Afrikaner figures, like author Max Dupree's, call the persecution claims a total absurdity.
What about the actual farm murder statistics?
South African police reported 44 farm murders in 2024. 8 of the victims were farmers. Race isn't officially tracked, but generally, farmers are mostly white, farm workers mostly Black.
This whole issue seems to have really strained U.S.-South Africa relations.
It has, going back to when Trump first directed his administration to look into resettling Afrikaners. South Africa's ambassador was even expelled after accusing Trump of using white victimhood as a dog whistle. Plus, the U.S. has been critical of South Africa's stance on Israel at the ICJ.
Okay. Moving on to some other news. Rapper Tory Lanez was involved in an incident in prison?
Yes, he was hospitalized after being stabbed,
Hmm.
reportedly 14 times by another inmate at the California Correctional Institution in Tehachapi.
14 times. That sounds severe.
It was. Wounds to his back, torso, head, face. Both lungs collapsed temporarily, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
The reports say he's now breathing on his own and in good spirits.
Is the motive known?
Not yet. An investigation is underway. Lanez, of course, is serving a 10-year sentence for shooting Megan Thee Stallion back in 2020. All right, now let's turn to Europe. Poland is pointing fingers at Russia over a major fire.
This was the shopping center fire in Warsaw back in 2024.
That's the one. A massive fire. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk says they know for sure it was arson, ordered by Russian special services.
You're sure about that?
That's what Tusk stated. He mentioned some individuals responsible are in custody, others identified and being sought. It follows a year-long Polish investigation.
And other officials are backing this up.
Yes, the Justice and Interior Ministers said the actions were organized and directed by a specific person residing in the Russian Federation. They're cooperating with Lithuania on this as well.
Calling it part of Russia's hybrid war.
Exactly. Both Poland and NATO believe Russia is waging this kind of warfare across Europe. Russia, for its part, has denied previous accusations of sabotage.
And Lithuania has made similar accusations.
Yes. Lithuanian prosecutors accused Russia of an arson attack on an IKEA store in Vilnius last year. That Warsaw shopping center fire, by the way, destroyed around 1,300 small businesses. A huge impact.
Okay, also in Europe, Kim Kardashian is set to appear in court in Paris.
Yes, as a witness in the trial related to the burglary she experienced back in 2016.
Right, she was held at gunpoint in her hotel room.
Correct. Millions of dollars worth of jewelry were stolen. 10 defendants are now on trial.
Has there been any testimony yet?
Yes. The night receptionist, who was also held, testified. He described Kardashian as completely hysterical, in a state of complete terror, as a gunman pointed a weapon at her.
A terrifying experience. And a lot of valuable jewelry was taken.
Millions, including a diamond ring reportedly worth $4 million.
And the defendants? They're mostly older men.
Yes, dubbed the grandpa robbers.
Yeah.
Mostly in the 70s, some with health issues. The alleged ringleader is deaf and mute.
But prosecutors aren't buying a hapless elderly image.
No, they're pointing out the planning involved use of cable ties, tape, burner phones. The receptionist said he genuinely feared for his life and ended up acting as an interpreter between the gunman and Kardashian. He was later diagnosed with PTSD, saying his life fell apart.
And Kardashian herself is expected to testify.
Yes, along with her friend and stylist. Her testimony is expected to draw significant media attention, of course. Experts suggest it could be a way for her to sort of reclaim agency over the event.
Okay. Let's move to the Vatican. Pope Leo XIV made an address concerning journalists.
He did, in his first address to the media. He called specifically for the release of imprisoned journalists worldwide.
Expressing solidarity with them.
Yes, solidarity with those jailed for seeking and reporting the truth. He said their suffering challenges the conscience of nations and the international community.
Did he touch on other communication themes?
He did. He urged rejecting the war of words and images and the whole paradigm of war. Instead, he called for communication that really listens, especially to the voices of the weak and marginalized. And he also brought up concerns about AI, urging its responsible use for humanity's benefit.
Interesting points. Now, something from space. A piece of old Soviet hardware came back down.
Seems likely, yes.
Yep.
Part of the Cosmos 482 spacecraft, which launched way back in 1972. It was meant for Venus, but failed and broke up in Earth orbit.
And a piece just re-entered after 50 years.
Over 50 years, yeah. The lander fragment likely re-entered around 06.16 GMT on Saturday.
Do we know where it came down or if it survived?
That's unclear. Could have burned up entirely, or fragments might have reached the surface. The exact location isn't known. Experts say the risk of damage is very low, though, given how much of the Earth is covered by ocean.
But this lander was built tough, right? For Venus.
Yeah. Exactly. Designed to withstand Venus's harsh atmosphere, which suggests it might have survived re-entry into Earth's atmosphere, at least partially, though its parachute system would likely have degraded over 50 years.
Are these kinds of re-entries common?
Re-entries of human-made objects happen frequently, actually. It does highlight the ongoing discussion about designing future spacecraft for safe, controlled deorbits at the end of their missions.
Right. Okay, let's turn to Sudan. Port Sudan is facing attacks.
Yes, it's reeling from about a week of aerial attacks now. This is fallout from the country's ongoing civil war.
Who is carrying out the attacks?
Drone attacks reportedly by the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF. They've been targeting fuel depots.
And that's having knock-on effects.
Big ones.
Hmm.
Water prices have apparently increased fivefold because the fuel needed for water pumps is scarce. Same for transportation fuel long queues at petrol stations.
And Port Sudan was seen as a safe haven before this.
It was, relatively speaking. Many people fled there from other conflict zones in Sudan. Now they're living in fear again. Plus, blackouts have worsened.
What about humanitarian aid? Port Sudan is crucial for that, isn't it?
Absolutely critical. It's a major hub for aid entering the country. Aid agencies are warning these attacks could severely constrain the delivery of life-saving supplies to people in need across Sudan.
A worrying development. Now, back to the U.S., there's talk about suspending habeas corpus.
Yes, the Trump administration is reportedly actively looking at suspending the right of habeas corpus, that fundamental right to challenge your detention in court.
On what grounds?
Stephen Miller, a key advisor, cited the Constitution allowing suspension during times of rebellion or invasion. This comes as judges have been challenging detentions related to immigration enforcement and also some dissenting foreign students.
Miller called it a privilege.
He did describe habeas corpus as a privilege. Legal experts strongly question that interpretation, emphasizing that the authority to suspend habeas corpus traditionally rests with Congress, not the president alone.
Has that ever been suspended before?
Yes, 4 times in U.S. history, notably during the Civil War by Lincoln and also in Hawaii after the Pearl Harbor attack, but it's extremely rare.
And courts have generally upheld it for non-citizens, too.
Courts have found that both citizens and non-citizens physically present in the U.S. generally have the right to petition for habeas corpus. We've seen it come up in recent cases involving migrant deportations and student detentions.
Okay, definitely something to watch. Let's talk economics now. Gold prices have been soaring.
They really have.
Yeah.
Up over 40% in the past year, hitting record highs.
What's driving that?
Economists point to a few things. Unpredictable U.S. trade policy, certainly. Geopolitical uncertainty around the world. And significantly, central banks have been buying a lot more gold since 2022.
Is the freezing of Russia's reserves a factor there?
Potentially, yeah. It might have made other central banks nervous about holding assets that could be frozen, pushing them towards gold. There might also just be a bit of FOMO, fear of missing out, driving demand from investors, too.
What are analysts predicting? More increases, a drop?
Opinions vary, as you'd expect. Some forecast further gains, others think a price correction is due. Historically, these major surges in gold prices have often been followed by pretty significant falls.
So caution is advised for investors.
Definitely. The standard advice is to consider gold as one part of a diversified investment portfolio, not to put all your eggs in one basket.
Got it. Now, an environmental story. Haze obscuring the Himalayas.
Yes, severe air pollution is causing this persistent haze. It's making it increasingly difficult to actually see the Himalayan mountain range, even from places like Kathmandu.
Even during the clearer seasons.
Even in spring and autumn, which are traditionally the best viewing times, it's now affecting those periods too. It's causing flight delays due to low visibility and hitting the tourism business.
What's causing the haze to be so bad and persistent?
Scientists say it's intensifying and lasting longer. It's a mix of pollutants, vehicle emissions, industrial pollution, dust, smoke from forest fires, and agricultural burning combined with climate change impacts and specific weather conditions that trap the pollutants near the ground.
Is this widespread in the region?
Yes. Reports from places like Pokhara in Nepal show a dramatic increase in the number of hazy days over the years. The Himalayas are likely the worst affected mountain range globally for this, just because of their location downwind from such populous and polluted regions in South Asia.
A real shame for such an iconic landscape. Okay, let's head to the French Riviera. The Cannes Film Festival is starting.
Kicks off Tuesday, yes. Always a major event, lots of Hollywood stars expected. It's often seen as a launch pad for films that might go on to compete for Oscars.
Who's heading the jury this year?
French actress Juliette Binoche.
Any big films in competition we should know about?
Definitely. There's Lynn Ramsey's new film, Die, My Love, starring Jennifer Lawrence and Robert Pattinson. Also, Wes Anderson's The Phoenician Scheme, which has a typically star-studded Anderson cast.
And some actors trying their hand at directing.
Yes. In the Uncertain Regard section, Scarlett Johansson and Kristen Stewart are both making their directorial debuts.
Any special honors or premieres?
Robert De Niro is receiving an honorary Palme d'Or. And Spike Lee's new film, starring Denzel Washington, will premiere out of competition.
What about documentaries?
A couple of notable ones. One about Fatima Hassouna, a Palestinian photojournalist covering the war, and another focusing on WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange.
And there's a backdrop of real-world issues intersecting with the festival.
Yes, the verdict in Gerard Depardieu's sexual assault trial is actually due on the opening day, which will inevitably keep the spotlight on issues of sexual violence in the film industry. Plus, there might be discussions around President Trump's potential plans for tariffs on foreign-made films.
Always a mix of glamour and serious discussion at Cannes. Now, U.S.-China trade talks, any progress there?
There seems to have been a shift, yeah. They held what both sides called robust talks in Geneva. Crucially, both stated they do not want a decoupling of their economies.
And President Trump's reaction?
He hailed the progress as a total reset. China also seemed to soften its tone, perhaps reflecting concerns about the impact tariffs were having on its economy.
So what's the actual agreement?
They've agreed to more talks through a new economic and trade consultation mechanism. And significantly, tariffs have been paused temporarily for 90 days until May 14th.
So a truce, essential.
For now, yes. It allows trade to flow more freely again and should calm markets a bit, but the fundamental disagreements haven't disappeared. The deal involves canceling some tariffs and suspending others. Before this, the escalating trade war had led to a real collapse in goods being shipped across the Pacific.
And who won this round?
Analysts are divided on that. Depends on how you look at the specific concessions made by each side in this initial pause.
Okay, sticking with President Trump. An executive order on U.S. drug prices.
Yes, he signed one aiming to reduce prescription drug prices, claiming they would fall almost immediately.
But experts are skeptical.
Very skeptical. The U.S. healthcare system is incredibly complex, and drug prices are notoriously high compared to other developed countries. Trump blamed pharmaceutical lobbying for the lack of progress so far.
What does the order actually do?
It directs officials to try and ensure that deals setting drug prices in foreign countries don't lead to unreasonable price hikes for Americans. It also proposes a most favored nation status, meaning the U.S. would aim to pay no more than the lowest price paid in comparable foreign countries.
How would that be enforced?
That's the big question. The mechanism is unclear. Experts suggest drug companies might argue they already comply through existing rebates and discounts.
Did the markets react strongly?
Minimally, which suggests investors don't expect a huge immediate impact. There's also the possibility drug companies could pull out of cheaper markets to avoid setting low benchmarks, or they could challenge the order in court.
And the industry isn't happy?
No, industry groups oppose the order, warning it could be counterproductive and harm innovation or access.
A complex issue. Now, a story from Brazil about a rare disease.
Yes, fascinating work by biologist Silvana Santos. She identified and named Spohn syndrome in a remote town called Serrinha dos Pintos.
What is Spohn syndrome?
It's a genetic condition causing gradual weakening of the body. It appears when a child inherits a specific altered gene from both parents.
And it's prevalent in this specific town.
Unusually so. The town has a historically high rate of consanguineous marriages between relatives, which increases the chance of recessive genetic disorders like this appearing.
So Santos's research provided answers.
Yes, it gave families a diagnosis, which led to more support and aid. The mutation itself likely traces back centuries to European settlers. Her work tracing patients has improved understanding and care, moving away from old, stigmatizing local terms for the condition.
How does it affect patients?
Physical limitations tend to worsen with age. There's now a new research project planned to screen couples in the area for genes linked to serious recessive diseases like Spohn to help with family planning.
Important work. Okay, let's turn to South Asia again. India and Pakistan agreed to a ceasefire.
They did, after 4 intense days of military exchanges across the line of control in Kashmir.
Was there outside mediation involved?
Yes. U.S. mediators played a role, alongside other diplomatic efforts behind the scenes.
But is the ceasefire holding?
Well, accusations of violations emerged quite quickly after the announcement, so it's fragile. The tensions flared up following a militant attack in Indian-administered Kashmir.
What was seen as a key moment in de-escalation?
The U.S. Secretary of State's phone call to Pakistan's army chief is often cited as a potential turning point. Reports suggest the U.S., UK, and Saudi Arabia were all actively working to cool things down.
Pakistan acknowledged international involvement.
They indicated many countries were involved in the diplomacy. The U.S. role is generally seen as significant, though the exact extent is debated. Pakistan had signaled its position through military retaliation and convening its National Command Authority, which oversees nuclear weapons.
Did Washington's relationship with India play a part?
Possibly. Washington's deepening ties with New Delhi might have given it some diplomatic leverage. It seems multiple peace tracks were active US-UK pressure, Saudi mediation, and maybe even some direct India-Pakistan back channels.
A tense situation, hopefully calming down. Finally, Ukraine and Russia. Talk of direct talks.
Yes, Russian President Putin offered direct talks with President Zelensky, potentially in Istanbul. Zelensky responded cautiously.
Cautiously, how so?
He called it a positive sign that Russia might be considering an end to the war. But Ukraine is expecting Russia to first confirm its commitment to a 30-day ceasefire.
Is there a Trump factor here too?
Potentially. Neither leader likely wants to be seen by President Trump as the one blocking a path to peace, especially with his focus on ending conflicts. Trump himself reacted positively to the offer, hinting the war could be nearing an end.
But Ukraine still needs support.
Absolutely. Zelensky stressed the urgent ongoing need for air defense supplies from allies, especially given lingering concerns about potential further Russian missile attacks.
So a glimmer of hope, but still a very critical need for defense.
Exactly. A lot hinges on whether this offer is genuine and if a ceasefire can actually be established.
Indeed. Well, those are some of the key developments we're tracking today. Each story carries significant weight, and we encourage you to explore these issues further.
Absolutely. Thinking about these events really helps frame our understanding of this complex world, what stands out most to you, and what questions does it raise moving forward.